Hello there, you're watching Nightline with me, Pritha Manivannan. News making the headlines. Hospital Tengku Ampuan Rahimah, Klang patients, staff contracted COVID-19. And the government will ensure iconic Pulau Pinang ferries to continue sailing. Good morning. Parties in the government comprising components of Perikatan Nasional PN, Barisan Nasional BN and Gabungan Parti Sarawak GPS have agreed to form a presidential council. The decision to set up the presidential council was agreed by party leaders, including Prime Minister and PPBM President Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, UMNO President Datuk Sri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi and past President Datuk Sri Abdul Hadi Awang, among others. Now, PN Secretary General Datuk Sri Hamzah Zainuddin, in a statement on Thursday night, said a secretariat represented by the Secretary General from each party will be set up to coordinate the Presidential Council. During the meeting, PN component parties also discussed forming strong political ties for political stability and the welfare of the people and national prosperity. The Selangor Health Department has confirmed a COVID-19 breakout among medical frontliners as well as patients in the Tengku Ampuan Rahimah Hospital HDAR in Klang. Selangor Health Director Dr. Shari Ngadiman said that currently no less than 50 medical personnel have been infected with COVID-19. He added that they are now undergoing treatment at the Sungai Buloh Hospital. Dr. Shari, however, did not state how many patients at the government hospital had contracted the coronavirus. Dr. Shari also noted that Klang, Selangor, is a red zone and the rise of severe acute respiratory infection cases at the HDAR could have caused an increase in coronavirus cases. He advised the public against visiting the hospital if there are no urgent matters at hand. He also urged the public from refraining from spreading any unverified information so as not to trigger any unnecessary panic and confusion within the community. Putrajaya is still considering several other COVID-19 vaccines, which are in their third stage of trial. Science, Technology and Innovation Minister Khairi Jamaluddin told Parliament on Thursday that the priority list on who gets inoculated first would also be announced later. He said the government, through the Ministry of Health, signed an initial purchase agreement with Pfizer on November 24th, and the selection of the vaccine was based on the interim report and the clinical trial, which showed that the vaccine was found to have a 95% effectiveness in preventing COVID-19. He said the government also had access to data to assess its quality, safety and level of effectiveness. Khairi added that the vaccine also obtained the emergency use authorization from 7 countries, including the United Kingdom, the United States, Bahrain, Canada, Saudi Arabia, Mexico and Singapore. However, he said the decision to use the vaccine in Malaysia is still subject to registration and approval from the National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Division, NPRA, of the Health Ministry. He said the process has begun and all data supplied by Pfizer will be scrutinized by the NPRA, adding that the supply of COVID-19 vaccine for Pfizer is expected to be received in the first quarter of 2021, covering 12.8 million doses to meet the immunization needs of 20% or 6.4 million Malaysians.
Selain vaksin COVID-19 daripada Pfizer, Malaysia juga telah menyertai fasiliti COVAX yang menjamin akses bekalan vaksin sebanyak 10% populasi negara. Jawatankuasa JKJAV ketika ini sedang mempertimbangkan calon-calon vaksin lain yang berada di fasa 3 ujian klinikal untuk digunakan di Malaysia. Pengumuman mengenai ini dan juga senarai keutamaan siapa yang akan menerima vaksin dahulu akan diumumkan dalam masa yang terdekat.
On November 27th, Khairi said the government is working to secure COVID-19 vaccine doses for an initial target of 70% of Malaysia's population to achieve herd immunity, with 20% already secured through a deal with Pfizer and 10% also secured through a 92.3 million ringgit payment by Malaysia. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Datuk Seri Tengku Zafrul Abdul Aziz also assured the members of Parliament that no middlemen will be involved in the COVID-19 vaccine procurement.
Saya memberi komitmen di sini kerajaan akan hanya berunding secara terus dengan pembekal vaksin tanpa orang tengah.
On a related matter, he said that 5 billion ringgit allocation for the vaccine would include expenditures incurred by the health sector to meet demand faced by frontliners to combat the virus, including 3 billion for the procurement of the vaccine. He also said that the government was seeking to increase the allocation for the temporary measures for government financing COVID-19 Bill 2020 from 45 billion to 65 billion ringgit, as there are several initiatives under the 4 economic stimulus packages that need to be implemented. The motion to increase the allocation was subsequently passed after Dewan Rakyat Deputy Speaker Datuk Muhammad Rashid Hasnon announced that a majority of the members of Parliament had voted in favour of it via voice vote. The federal government will ensure that the iconic Pulau Pinang ferry remains in service. Finance Minister Datuk Seri Tengku Zafrul Abdul Aziz said this will be the conditions set by the government to Penang Port Sdn Bhd PPSB, which will take over ferry services in the state. In his ministry's winding-up speech during the policy stage in the Dewan Rakyat on Thursday, Datuk Seri Tengku Zafrul said the 30 million ringgit approved by the previous Pakatan Harapan government to PPSB will be channelled in 2 instalments beginning next year.
Seperti mana yang Berhormat Bagan sedia maklum, kerajaan sebelum ini pun telah meluluskan peruntukan sebanyak 30 juta ringgit untuk pihak Penang Port mengambil alih perkhidmatan feri Pulau Pinang. Saya ingin mengesahkan bahawa peruntukan tersebut seperti yang diluluskan sebelum ini akan dibayar dalam 2 ansuran tahunan. Peruntukannya 15 juta ringgit untuk tahun 2021 adalah termasuk dalam peruntukan yang telah diluluskan dalam RUU Perbekalan 2021.
Lim had earlier asked that the government to preserve the ferry services that he said were synonymous with the state. He also thanked Datuk Seri Tengku Zafrul for the assurance and asked that Transport Minister Datuk Seri Wee Ka Siong see the matter true. PPC Chairman Datuk Tan Teck Cheng recently announced that the old ferries in Pulau Pinang will be stopped entirely by 2022 and replaced by water buses and vehicle transporters. Lim, a former Pulau Pinang chief minister, had criticised the move and lamented that replacing the iconic ferries with modern water buses was a cold and callous approach that ignored the state's unique heritage and history. Meanwhile, Pulau Pinang has welcomed the federal government's assurance that the iconic ferry will remain in service. Chief Minister Chow Kon Yao hoped it would be a reality and that the ferry service would continue to serve Penangites, fellow Malaysians and tourists alike.
So I welcome the latest statement by MOF and hope that this would become a reality, that the iconic ferry will continue to serve the people of Penang, Malaysians from other states and tourists alike.
The Parliament Public Accounts Committee, PAC, will call former Defence Minister Datuk Seri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi early next month to complete the proceedings regarding the issue of non-delivery of 6 littoral combatant ships, LCS, to the Navy. According to its chairman, Wong Kah-Woh, the committee plans to complete and table its report on the issue in the Dewan Rakyat by March next year. Wong said the committee views seriously the issue of the non-delivery of the 6 LSC involving the Defence Ministry, as the procurement, valued at 9 billion ringgit, the highest made by the ministry so far, will give a negative impact on national security and defence. He also said the PAC was of the opinion that a decision on the issue must be made by the government as soon as possible. Apart from Datuk Seri Zahid, the PAC will also summon former Royal Malaysian Navy Chief Tan Sri Abdul Aziz Jaafar and the main contractor of the LSC project, Boston Naval Shipyard BNS Sdn Bhd.
Pelantikan kontraktor utama iaitu Boston Naval Shipyard BNS Sdn Bhd dilakukan secara rundingan terus. Sehingga Oktober 2020, sejumlah 6.083 bilion ringgit telah pun dibayar dan tidak ada sebuah pun kapal LCS yang telah siap dibina, walaupun mengikut jadual sepatutnya 2 buah kapal LCS harus siap dibina dan diserahkan setakat ini.
He added the PAC would also visit the LSC shipyard in Lumut, Perak next month. The issue was first reported in the Auditor General's Report 2019 Series 1 and the Governance, Procurement and Finance Investigation Committee Investigation Report published last year.
Just 2%. That's the creative industry's contribution to Malaysia's GDP. With 2021 declared as the International Year of Creative Economy, how can Malaysia have a sustainable and thriving creative industry to boost its significance? Malaysia's largely untapped creative economy on Money Matters this Saturday with me, Timina Kausji, only on TV3.
The Health Ministry has reported 1,220 COVID-19 cases and 3 deaths in the past 24 hours. Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah, however, said there were 1,297 recoveries, bringing the total number of those discharged to 74,030. In a statement, Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham said the 1,220 cases bring the total number of infections in the country to 89,133. Selangor recorded 368 cases, of which 247 or 67.1% were from clusters and close contact screening. This was followed by Kuala Lumpur with 297 cases, Sabah with 184 cases, Malacca with 98 and Penang with 80 new cases. Meanwhile, the 3 fatalities bring the total death toll to 432. The Health Ministry also detected 3 new COVID-19 clusters in the country over the past 24 hours. They are known as Jalan Rusa Cluster and Pacific Construction Site Cluster in Kuala Lumpur and the Maringkan Cluster in Sabah. The Malaysian Water Endowment Fund, or Wakaf IA, was officially launched on Thursday as an alternative source of financing for water service projects through endowment instruments. So far, the fund has received almost 30 applications to implement water projects nationwide and over 7 million ringgit in donations. Environment and Water Minister Datuk Sri Tuan Ibrahim Tuan Man said Wakaf IA would focus on financing water service projects, which include water sources, water supply and small-scale sewerage projects costing not more than 50,000 ringgit.
Program Wakaf IA ini ialah salah satu usaha kementerian bersama dengan Menteri Agama sebagai pengurusi Yayasan Wakaf Malaysia, di mana kita membuka peluang kepada orang ramai yang ingin berwakaf. Kerana wakaf ini merupakan satu kaedah dengan tujuan satu je, mendapat redha Allah Ta'ala dan mendapat pahala yang berterusan.
He said for a start, Wakaf IA will focus on projects to provide clean water supply in rural areas, such as in building wells, purchasing spare parts and water tanks, as well as providing pipe connections from water sources. Datuk Sri Tuan Ibrahim added the applications received were currently being scrutinized and the projects were expected to start by early next year. To facilitate endowment affairs, he said the community can contribute online with only 10 ringgit and all donations will be managed through a special Wakaf IA account administered by Yayasan Wakaf Malaysia. As a long-term sustainable measure, the ministry had also agreed to allow part of the fund to be invested in an authorized portfolio. After the break, man who stabs his 20-month-old baby gets 10 years in jail. Details next. Welcome back. Now, 4 people, including a company owner and director, were nabbed by the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission MACC for allegedly soliciting a 60,000 ringgit bribe to settle a case under the probe by graft busters. Three of the men were aged between 39 and 54, were detained in a trap set at a hotel in Putrajaya on Wednesday, while the 4th suspect was picked up at his house in Malacca. One of the suspects detained in the operation was the mastermind known as Datuk Roy, who was impersonating as an MACC director. All 4 were given a 6-day remand until December 22nd at the Putrajaya Magistrates Court under Section 117 of the Criminal Procedure Code. Sources said the 4 men, who were impersonating as senior officers from the MACC and Deputy Public Prosecutor, had solicited bribes supposedly to lighten charges against the complainant and reopen his bank account, said to have been frozen by the MACC. Based on intelligence, the group members were even willing to walk into the MACC headquarters to have their photos taken to convince the complainant that they were indeed MACC officers. Their movements were recorded by closed-circuit television camera CCTV at the MACC headquarters. The source added that the graft buster was also tracking down a female member of the group to help the probe. A man who stabbed his toddler in the abdomen with a 33 meters bread knife last week has been jailed for 10 years. Muhammad Shafwan Shafi'i pleaded guilty to the charge of attempted murder under Section 307 of the Penal Code before Judge Muhammad Mukhzani Mokhtar at the Petaling Jaya Sessions Court on Thursday. The 27-year-old was arrested on Saturday after stabbing his 20-month-old baby at a flat in Puchong Permai. According to the facts of the case, police received a call at about 4:30 p.m. that a man had stabbed his daughter in a fit of rage. On arrival at the scene, the man refused to surrender and a scuffle broke out between him and 8 police officers, after which they recovered the knife. Police found his daughter lying on the kitchen floor with a deep wound in her abdomen and she was rushed to the Serdang hospital. During the proceedings, the man sobbed as he was shown photos of the brutal incident. The man had tested positive for methamphetamine and was reported to be suffering from emotional stress following his divorce. The toddler is now in a stable condition and is still receiving treatment at the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit in Hospital Kuala Lumpur. In Malacca, police have busted an unlicensed money lending syndicate with the arrest of a man believed to be an active in along or loan shark activities since 2016. This was following a raid in Cheng Perdana, Malacca Tengah last Sunday. State Deputy Police Chief Datuk Sharul Lali Mazduki said the 40-year-old suspect was arrested at his house, which was used as an office to carry out the loan shark activities.
Faedah yang telah dikenakan terhadap peminjam-peminjam tadi adalah di antara 6% hingga 11% sebulan. Bukan setahun, 6% hingga 11% sebulan. Dan untuk makluman jugalah bahawa kegiatan pemberi pinjam wang tadi dia berlega di seluruh negeri Melaka, iaitu Melaka Tengah, Alor Gajah dan juga Jasin.
Authorities believe that about 626 loans amounting to over 300,000 ringgit are still active with the discovery of the borrowers' documents in a raid, most of whom are petty traders, factory workers, as well as single mothers who were not eligible to apply for bank loans. During the operation, police also seized various other items, including 5 mobile phones, 9 debit cards, 52 bank account books of various banks, cash and a Perodua Beza car. The suspect had been remanded for 4 days to facilitate investigations under the Moneylenders Act. 3 dead as US braces one of its worst snowstorms. This and more from the foreign front after the break. You're still with us on Nightline. Now on to the foreign front. 8 prominent Hong Kong democracy activists were charged on Thursday for taking part in an illegal assembly on the day after Beijing imposed its broad security law, bolstering an already sweeping crackdown on dissent. Those charged included veteran activist long-haired Leung Kwok Hung, the former chief of Hong Kong's Democratic Party, Wu Chi-wai, ex-legislator Eddie Chew and Figo Chan, the organizer of an annual July 1st rally marking the British handover of the city to China in 1997. The group had been hit with various unlawful assembly charges, namely organizing, inciting or taking part in an illegal gathering. The charges stem from protests that broke out on July 1st this year, the anniversary of Hong Kong's handover to China. The date has traditionally witnessed large protests in a city where millions have taken to the streets in recent years. During months of protests that swept the city in 2019, the legislature was stormed on handover day by crowds in an unprecedented challenge to Beijing's rule. The day before this year's handover anniversary, Beijing enacted its draconian national security law, bypassing the legislature and keeping its contents secret until the moment it was imposed. The law enhanced Beijing's control over the city, outlawed certain political views and deepened the crackdown against democracy supporters. In the United States, at least 3 people were killed in car crashes as powerful snowstorm sweeps across the east coast of the country. Snow warnings are in place for much of the eastern seaboard, with more than 50 million people braced for outages and treacherous conditions on the roads. The National Weather Service said the storm was set to bring an overabundance of hazards from the mid-Atlantic to the northeast. Up to 60 centimeters of snow is predicted to fall in some parts, with around 18 inches to inches per hour expected from central Pennsylvania into southern New York and New England. Officials throughout the area urged motorists to stay off the roads and residents to stay at home, and some bus and rail services have been suspended. A crash in Pennsylvania killed 2 people and involved dozens of vehicles on a major road on Wednesday afternoon, with police issuing a reminder to only travel if absolutely necessary. Meanwhile, in Virginia, state police said officers had responded to around 200 crashes, including one on Interstate 81 that killed a North Carolina man. According to the FlightAware website, more than 600 flights have been cancelled in or out of the United States on Thursday. China will be welcoming an international team of COVID-19 investigators led by the World Health Organization (WHO) early January next year to investigate the origins of the virus that sparked one of the most deadliest pandemics in the world. WHO said on Thursday the organization is still in discussion with Beijing over where the investigators would travel to within the country. The United States, which has accused China of having hidden the outbreak's extent, has called for a transparent WHO-led investigation and criticized its terms, which allowed Chinese scientists to do the first phase of preliminary research. China has strongly opposed calls for an international inquiry into the origins of the coronavirus, saying such calls are anti-China, but has been open to a WHO-led investigation. However, it was unclear whether the WHO investigators will travel to the city of Wuhan, where the virus was first detected, with discussions on the itinerary ongoing. More than 72.92 million people have been reported to be infected by the coronavirus globally, and over 1.6 million have died. Infections have been reported in more than 210 countries and territories since the first case was identified in China in December 2019. Jakarta has called on people to stay at home and shopping malls to close early, beginning December 18th to January 8th during the Christmas and New Year holidays to prevent the spread of COVID-19. It urged residents not to stage or attend activities which can cause crowds, while workplaces were also asked to close at 7 p.m. and limit the number of workers to 50%, except for essential places that provides public services and serve emergency functions. Jakarta is an epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia, recording over 150,000 cases since the beginning of the pandemic. South Korea added more than 1,000 infections to its coronavirus caseload for the second straight day amid growing fears that the virus is spreading out of control in the great capital area. The COVID-19 death toll is now at 634 after 22 patients died in the past 24 hours on Thursday. It is the deadliest day since the emergence of the pandemic, with 12,209 active patients and 242 in serious or critical condition. The United States set a grim double record on Wednesday, notching more than 3,700 deaths and more than 250,000 new COVID-19 cases in 24 hours. According to figures from Johns Hopkins University, the country has seen a spectacular spike in COVID-19 infections for more than a month now, with about 113,000 people currently hospitalized due to the virus, also a new record. The tally marks the third time in the past week that the United States crossed the 3,000 deaths threshold. France's President Emmanuel Macron has tested positive for COVID-19 after developing symptoms. The LSE Palace said in a statement the 42-year-old will now self-isolate for 7 days and will work remotely. France this week imposed an overnight curfew to help deal with soaring cases in the country. Now let's take a look at the highlights in Malaysia's main newspapers for Friday, December 18th. The New Straits Times highlights on the COVID-19 vaccine side effects as experts say the benefits outweigh the risks of temporary mild side effects. Meanwhile, a report on Datuk Roy and 3 others who were arrested after posing as MACC officers is among the top stories featured on Malaysia's best-selling Malay newspaper, Harian Metro. Berita Harian focuses on the probe into non-delivery of littoral combatant ships. And a report on reconstructing talks between Malaysia Airlines Berhad and creditors and lessors takes the front page of the Malaysian Reserve. Don't forget to get your copies or subscribe to the online newspaper. Over 500,000 people usually visit the Santa village in Finland every year to meet Santa, play with the snow and get in the festive spirit. But this year, global travel restrictions mean few are making the international journey to the city that is beautifully Christmas themed. Now let's take a look at the visual as we wrap up Nightline. I'm Pritha Manivannan. Thanks for tuning in and stay safe.